I think it's an understatement when I say that Republicans are trying to steal our joy. They don't want us to stand for something as we do. They only stand against things. They are hell-bent on destroying everything from norms to institutions to our joy. And so when I feel like we are faced with just this insurmountable level of despair, I talk to people like my friend Brandon Wolf. He is the National Press Secretary and the Senior Head of Comms for HRC, the Human Rights Campaign. HRC is doing exceptional work, supporting the LGBTQ plus community and other, frankly, communities in the protection and the defense of all of our civil rights. But Brandon's been through it all. He's been to hell literally and back, having survived the Pulse nightclub shooting. But his message is clear. It's like a clarion bell. It's just so clear. And when you listen to what he has to say, you understand why Republicans, Trump, DeSantis, why they are so hell-bent on the eradication of people who are different, because we scare them. Our joy, our individuality, our uniqueness, it scares the shit out of them. They do not want us to be something else than we are, which is why it's really important to make sure that we unite in community, that we serve as allies and advocates for each other, and that we're just here. We're just here, whether in silence or in joy, in support of each other. So here's Brandon Wolf, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And joining me now is Brandon Wolf. He is the National Press Secretary and the Senior Director of Communications for the Human Rights Campaign. I affectionately love to call the HRC, not Hillary Rodham Clinton, but you know what? Pretty damn close. Brandon, it's always so good to see you, my friend. How you doing?
It's good to see you too. I think I'm like most Americans. I'm hanging in there. I'm trying to find moments of joy and hope despite what is very turbulent climate outside.
Yeah, you know what? I want to get into that in a minute because I do feel like it's a part of, the strength of your messaging, Brandon, in the way that you kind of own and embrace the fear and the stress and the anxiety, but you always seem to find something that's uplifting. So I definitely want to make sure we talk about that. But let's start with something that's near and dear to both of us, which is Florida.
Yeah.
The deer part gets a little challenged, I think. But DeSantis, as I like to call him, decided that of all the shit that he could be worrying about, it's rainbow crosswalks. And the reason why I want to continue to talk about the rainbow crosswalks is the state of Florida's Department of Transportation has decided that it makes more sense to continue to degrade and dehumanize an entire community of people, taxpayers and contributing, members of our Florida communities. And he thinks that they need to be painted over, that rainbow crosswalks constitute some type of threat to public safety.
Yeah, I'm so glad we're starting here because Florida is near and dear to my heart. And the dear part is really challenging when the leadership doesn't match the values of the great people who live across the state. I think there are a couple of things going on here. One, I think this governor and this president have made it their political identities to target LGBTQ plus people. Their goal is to divide and conquer, right? And so they join forces with the right wing who, focus grouped, poll tested, tried to figure out how to peel back rights and freedoms for Americans and found that most Americans don't know what it's like to be transgender. And so we can use that community as a scapegoat. And so they've spent years now on a crusade against LGBTQ plus people, whether it's banning books, limiting access to healthcare, dictating what after school activities people can do, banning drag shows, and now, yes, painting over rainbow crosswalks, not just in Florida, but around the country. And then I think there's a second part to this, and it's the reason that the right wing is so obsessed with trans people, with LGBTQ plus people, with crosswalks, with rainbows, with this idea of woke more generally. The right wing is terrified of people they cannot control. They're terrified of education they can't control. They're terrified of people making decisions for themselves and their families that are outside the confines, outside the boxes they've been assigned. And so they use the LGBTQ plus community as a poster child for what they will do to people who refuse to conform to the boxes that they've been assigned by the right wing. They believe that there's only one right way to be a human being, only one right way to be a boy, only one right way to be a girl, to build a family, to go to school, to live your life. And they use our community as the scapegoat and say, look at what we have done to them. We will do the same to you if you refuse to fall in line. So I think that is the messaging behind. It's so much more than paint on pavement, right? The right wing is doing it in all facets of life, and it's because they are looking for ultimate control and power over people.
I want to focus, though, on the crosswalk in Orlando that was done after the Pulse nightclub shooting, an event that literally changed the trajectory of your life. Not only did it impact you on a personal level, having been in the nightclub while the shooting and the massacre happened, but to lose Drew, to lose Juan, two of your best friends, that crosswalk was, to your point, more than just paint on the street. That crosswalk represented memories of loved ones, reminders that we have so far to go when it comes to common sense gun legislation, a purpose, a reminder of a purpose to eradicate hate and to work towards a time and a place where we don't have to live in such a cesspool of hatred and division. And so for DeSantis, how many times, Brandon, did he paint over that crosswalk now? 3 times?
Yeah, 3-4 times, and has state troopers positioned outside, babysitting the crosswalk. He's got signs saying that if you chalk any piece of it, you'll end up in handcuffs in the back of a cop car. You really hit the nail on the head that this is about so much more than rainbow colors on the pavement. That space is sacred. It's hallowed ground. It's the place where I can still hear my best friends' voices, where I can still see their smiles, where I think about the last words we got to say to each other, where I think about our last embrace before it was clear they were not coming home to say goodbye. That's what that space means to people like me. It's what that space means to the entire Orlando community. And what Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump have done is desecrate those memories. They have completely desecrated a space that is supposed to be sacred, not just for our community, by the way, but for everyone to come and be reverent and reflect and feel close to those who were stolen from us that night. And I'll just point out that in desecrating those memories and desecrating that space, they've also laid bare their agenda, because Ron DeSantis has spent more money positioning law enforcement to babysit that crosswalk, to sit in a parking lot on the hoods of their cars, than there ever was security outside of Pulse nightclub the night that it was attacked by someone filled with hate and armed with a weapon of war. So, when you look at what people have been subjected to in Orlando, across the state of Florida, across the globe, again, it is this one, it's this flex of power and control over people. 2, it's a disgrace. It's a desecration of the memories of those that we were memorializing. And 3, I think it lays bare that they care far more about sending a message of punishing LGBTQ plus people than they ever did about keeping people safe in the first place.
What's outrageous is a Department of Transportation spokesperson said in a statement that the DOT has a duty to ensure the safety and consistency of public roadways and transportation systems, and therefore to ensure roadways are not utilized for social, political, or ideological interests. DeSantis posting on X, "We will not allow our state roads to be commandeered for political purposes." I mean, Brandon, my biggest fear is this. When you get somebody like Ron DeSantis, when he commandeers for political purposes the Department of Transportation in the state of Florida, doing exactly what he claims it shouldn't be done, to assert one myopic, hateful view, it legitimizes the shooter that came armed with a weapon of war to the Pulse nightclub that evening. It gives cover, political cover, to people to be able to function in that climate and in that space of hate, because all they have to do is look and say, well, look, Ron DeSantis supports this idea that we shouldn't recognize anything that is unique, and we shouldn't be able to honor something that is unique and different than the typical white Christian nationalist message.
Yeah, well, this is the danger of the right-wing agenda of Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump, is about the emboldening and empowering of hate across the country. Listen, we've seen that since Donald Trump came down the escalator calling immigrants, rapists and murderers in 2015. since that moment, all we've done is watched as gasoline has been thrown on the fires of hate across this country. We saw it in Charlottesville. We've seen it in community after community that have been victims of gun violence, victims of other hate violence. That is the direct result of people like Ron DeSantis, people like Donald Trump stoking the flames of hate. And what makes me so afraid is that there's a population of young people out there who might be hearing that message and wondering if it's ever going to be safe to be themselves, who are wondering if it's ever going to be safe to be able to be authentically, unapologetically them, to chase their dreams, to build a family, to get a good job, to do all the things that they always hoped they would get a chance to do. There are young people out there who are ingesting that message of hate, who are seeing how it leads to discrimination, bullying, to violence around the country. And they wonder if they're ever going to get a chance to be fully and authentically themselves. And that's why I've been so dedicated to being an advocate for authenticity, for courage, for boldness, because I want to send a message to the next generation of Brandons that it doesn't have to be this way, and that the world needs you not in some muted or shaved down form, but in your fullest, most authentic, most proud self. So I really do. I worry about the next generation of young people, the message they're receiving, the kind of hate they see on display across this country, and them wondering whether it will ever be better than it is today.
Well, that hate gets institutionalized through laws like we've seen in the state of Florida that DeSantis has promulgated, passed with the support of his cronies in the Republican legislature. And then we look at the Trump administration and the fact that, for example, the 988 National Suicide Hotline for LGBTQ youth has now been gone. No funding left. And this statistic stuck with me, Brandon, because I thought it was so important. Nearly 1.5 million contacts were routed to the LGBTQ service since its launch. I mean, you still have the Trevor Project to be available as a resource, but talk about why it's just the further institutionalization of hatred when you know that there is a very real medical reason why LGBTQ plus youth need something like this suicide hotline.
Yeah, well, let's start by being clear that the Trump administration knows there is value in specialized resources, because if you call the 988 hotline and you are a veteran, you can still get a line that is dedicated to your health and well-being. So this administration understands the value that exists in providing specialized resources where someone can pick up the phone and the person on the other end understands their life, understands their lived experiences, understands the risk that they are in physically, mentally, and the need that they have for care that is respondent to all of those things. And so you can see why it is so offensive, so hurtful, so painful for them to rip those resources away from LGBTQ plus young people, because they know why those resources exist in the first place. But it fits, as you said, this institutionalization of hate that Donald Trump has been waging across the federal government. Because remember, this is a man who also kicked, well-qualified, highly trained members of the military out of their service simply because they are transgender. This is a man who has repeatedly said he's coming after healthcare, has pressured hospitals to stop providing medically necessary care to transgender young people and their families. This is a man who has waged war on access to public spaces like bathrooms in airports. This is a man who has come after transgender people for having passports that match their other documents. This is a man who is on a crusade against the LGBTQ plus community, building a political identity on our backs. And I have to say that it takes a particular level of diabolical evil to beat down the mental health of vulnerable children in this country, to tell them over and over again that they are not of value, that they're not worthy, that they should change themselves to fit somebody else's idea of who they're supposed to be. And then after you've beat their mental health down, you rip the resource out from underneath them that they need to combat the political climate we are in. That is, again, diabolical. And I can't imagine how depraved you have to be to want to see children have a resource like that ripped out from underneath them, especially when they need it most.
I always marvel, Brandon. It's like the Republican Party is supposed to be the party that's not supposed to be up in your shit. Let's just speak frankly, right?
Yeah, that's what they've always said they were.
That's what they've always said they were. But for a party that supposedly doesn't want to know and thinks that, small government and no big government interference, whatever, they spend a whole lot of time in my vagina, in your bedroom, in our lifestyles, right? Like it's just amazing in our classrooms. I mean, in our doctor's offices. It is amazing to me that they have so much time, energy, and they want to waste the money to be able, because, they're stealing from Peter to feed Paul, but that Paul is definitely not somebody other than the white Christian nationalist. I mean, it really is amazing to me, which is why part of the campaign of the Trump administration and the Republicans has been something that I want to touch on with you, because your memoir, A Place for Us, is so poignant and beautiful and just painful all in one fell swoop. But there's kind of a two-pronged message that comes from your memoir and that comes from you, Brandon. And it was part of the reason why I really wanted to talk to you today. You have spoken about how our opponents are hell-bent on what I call the machine gun theory, right? I guess no pun intended, but just throw the spaghetti on the wall, see what sticks. But the problem is, as you've put it, they set a million different fires, so it becomes difficult for us to pool our resources, identify the arsonists, put out the blazes, and find a way to get through all of that collective trauma. How do we manage this, though? Because you're right. This flood the zone with shit that we know Steve Bannon has implemented, it works, Brandon. It works day in and day out the way that they've deployed it. How do we begin to kind of manage that type of tactic we're seeing from the other side?
Yeah, it is very effective, right? I think they're not the first ones to use it, right? They've stolen this playbook from other authoritarians throughout history. They've stolen it, by the way, from war games tactics, right? It is, infamously, Adolf Hitler used the Blitzkrieg tactic to try to break the wills of his opponents physically. So they're not the first people to use the technique of trying to overwhelm their opposition by just doing as much as possible in a short amount of time. If I had all the answers, I'd probably be a very rich political consultant. But I think what I've learned along this journey, and especially in the 5 years I did this work under Ron DeSantis's regime, what I learned is that you have to give people some North Star to find their way back to, and a way to tell the story that feels like it touches all parts, but doesn't dig too deep into the weeds. And what I mean by that is, whether we've really lived up to this promise as a country or not, people believe in freedom. They really value their freedom. They do not want politicians in Washington, D.C. telling them how to raise their children, telling them what books to read to people at bedtime, telling them what decisions to make in their doctor's office or their kids' pediatrician offices. They don't want politicians telling them what to do. They want politicians fixing actual macro problems. They want the potholes fixed. They want the mail to come on time. They want the price of groceries to be reasonable. They want to be able to afford a house and put gas in the car and not have to worry that they'll fall behind on their prescriptions. That's what people value in this country. And they are sick and tired of the obsession that the right wing has with controlling everything about who we are and how we live our lives. And if you can find a way to wrap that around the things that are happening in this country and not get dragged into the weeds and what did Donald Trump tweet today, and what's this AI picture that he's now lifting on his Truth Social account, and instead lift it one level higher and tell people this broader story of what Donald Trump and the right-wing Republicans are up to in this moment. Instead of making life easier for you, they are trying to dictate to you how to raise your family, how to chase your dreams, how to live, how to be. If you can tell that more holistic story, then you can help people not feel like they have to bite it all off at one time. And the other thing I would just say quickly is that if you're listening at home and you don't know what to do, you feel overwhelmed, maybe you're like, I'm not really that political. As political as I get is listening to Katie, and then I feel informed, and now I don't know what to do with that information. Find the thing in your community that lights your fire, right? I wrote in the book as well that I think a lot of people feel like they have to save the world in order to earn a place in it. I'm telling you today that it is not your world to save alone, that all of us are in it together, and it requires you in your community, locally, face to face with people, tackling problems that light your fire. And when you carry that little piece of the movement, know that there are millions and millions of other people carrying their pieces of the movement. And that's how we make real change. That's community organizing.
Yeah, and that gives me the chills because I do spend a lot of time speaking with and sharing the message with the viewers, subscribers, and people that you have to be activated and engaged, but that we shouldn't judge each other for our levels of activation and engagement because it looks something different for everybody, right? It's maybe a reflection of your comfort level. I always use it as an example. Not everybody wants to go out and march on October 18th for No King's Day 2.0, but maybe what you want to do is you want to convene over a good cup of coffee and talk about how you can change something in your immediate pocket of the world. One of the other kind of big tenets that you share in your book and that you also share generally, Brandon, is this idea of finding joy. Sometimes there is a guilt associated these days, is it not? In the midst of all of this misery and sadness and this feeling of you're always on the back heel on this, like almost on the defensive, it's okay to find joy, isn't it? Because I feel like sometimes people feel like they're not allowing themselves to find joy and some pocket of peace in the midst of all of this chaos.
Yeah, I would even go one step further and say it's necessary to find joy in this moment. I take a lot of lessons from our ancestors and the people in the fights that came before us. And I think a lot about those in the HIV and AIDS movement. I think it was Dan Savage who wrote about dancing after hours and that being the fuel for the fight the next day, right? I think about people in the civil rights movement leaning on church and music, worship together, faith as a way of getting through really difficult times. All of these moments of trial and tribulation call us to find joy, because to go back to one of the first questions you asked about why is the right wing doing this? Why do they come after books and movies and sources of visibility? It's because they are terrified of people they can't control. And what is the biggest physical sign of a community they can't control? A community's joy, right? They try to beat you into the ground and you respond with this radiance, this defiant radiance that they cannot contain, that they cannot control, and it becomes contagious. Other people see that and they want to be called into the fight alongside you. So I tell people all the time, I do not celebrate overwork. If you see me celebrating overwork on my Instagram page, tell me to go to bed, to log off, to watch a good Netflix show, to do something to find balance. What I try to celebrate in this world is defiant joy, is resilient hope, is contagious courage. And I think when we lean into those things in our community, they dare other people to find joy and hope and courage too.
You are doing significant and impressive work at the Human Rights Campaign. Let people who are tuning in right now know, how can they support the HRC and how can they find you, read your book, all the good stuff?
Yeah, thank you. On the Human Rights Campaign front, we are working so hard, tirelessly, for a world that is free and equal for all people. So if that feels like it calls to you, if you're one of those people who's like, I don't know what to do next, you should join us at the Human Rights Campaign. You can go to hrc.org. Right now, we just launched a 1 million Voices for Equality campaign, encouraging 1 million new people, whether they're LGBTQ+, allies or otherwise, to come into the fight, to share your story of why equality means so much for you, why you're fighting for a world where everyone gets the chance to chase their American dream. Be part of our 1 million Voices for Equality campaign. And then from a personal place, you can go to brandonwolf.us. You can find me on all social media channels. I'm not very good at TikTok. Maybe you can teach me how to be better at that. But let's please stay connected. As you said, community has saved my life so many times. Every time I thought I couldn't go on, it was community that got me through to the next day. And I think we all need that deep well of community right now. So I'm really looking forward to being in community with everyone watching today.
I'm always grateful, Brandon Wolf, for your time. It is a gift for me on a personal level to hear your voice, to hear your messaging, and to really kind of take it in. I feel like there are those of us that are on the front lines, and it's overwhelming. I'm a little emotional right now. It gets overwhelming to kind of deal with the battering and the effect of it. But when I get to spend time with you, it refills my cup, and then it overfloweth, and then it gives me the energy and the reinvigorated desire to make sure that I'm out there in the fight. So Brandon Wolf, thank you so much for spending in your busy life. Thank you for spending some time with me. I'm eternally grateful.
Thank you. Anytime. Good to see you.
Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.